Hey there. Welcome back. Sorry it's been so long. I've been having some work done on the house, so didn't think you'd want to hear banging in the background. So, as I talked about in the Survey Says Tower Moment video, in order to make sure my dating relationships in the future were good, I needed to clean off some proverbial mud that had been buried deep in my subconscious. I'm a huge believer, as you guys should know by now, of continually evolving, growing, doing better, being better, and I continually put myself into situations that just ended up without success. And I'm a big fan of figuring out what I can do better. And so, as I promised myself it wasn't going to happen again, if I could help it. So, as I mentioned, in order to get to the heart of my dating and relationships, I needed to go back and dissect the stories that I was telling myself about love and my part of the dating relationships that I had had, my sexuality, and who I was as a woman. People live up to the standards you hold yourself to, and as a result, you teach them how to treat you. I realized that I wasn't valuing or loving myself enough, and although I had dealt with my body issues earlier in my journey, it was high time to just dissect my history of dating and relationships and pull out all the nuggets and the lessons learned and then put them into action moving forward. Again, making sure I was always better next time. I realized as I was reflecting that because I'm such a strong empath, I always see the heart of people, who they are at their core. And because of that, I ignore red flags that were thrown and identified by my gut. But every time, I just knew I could help them see their own heart and potential, and many times at my own self-detriment. As always, to protect others in my stories as much as possible, I'll be changing some tiny little details such as names in order to protect their privacy. But without including these stories, I would be leaving out an important piece of my journey. So, no two things that as you're listening to both of these videos. I'm going to break it up into two because it would be too long if I did it all in one. Plus, it's a pain in the ass to upload. So, know these two things as you're listening. This is through my lens and my lens only. I'm sure they'd have their own perspectives and their own stories. And two, I'm sharing the emotions that I had exactly at the time that I was doing this dissection. It's a moment in time, if you will. Doesn't mean that's how I feel now. It's just as I'm sharing my story and my journey and my evolution, I want to make sure that you understand kind of where my head was at that time. If you haven't listened to my the two videos about sexuality that I did with AI, kind of experimenting, I know it's a pain in the ass to listen to the AI voice, but I was just playing with it, and I won't do those again unless I say it. I probably will do some again, but unless I tell you I'm going to do them, don't trust anything else. Actually, side note, this is the only place that I'm posting videos. If you see anywhere else, I do have the community, and I've been posting classes about those, and so you'll see those kind of layered in about the quest, building that community membership I told you about. But other than that, if you see posted videos about Global Divine Alchemy, they're not mine. And again, we use the community, LinkedIn, and our website to post. So if you're seeing it anywhere else, report it. All right, getting back. Remember, I'm sharing my story only in the hopes that you'll reflect on your own life, your relationships, and figure out how to heal yourself in your own way with your own methodologies. I'm hoping that you'll see everything as kind of like peeling an onion. You tackle one layer and then you realize there's another layer. So, on to the next layer. And again, entertainment purposes only. Be discerning. Take from this what you will. If you need to see a psychologist about anything, go see them. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be an expert. I'm just sharing my journey to help other people. So, as I go back in my relationships and my history, as I did in the sexuality video, I realized as a kid, I always felt like a bit of a misfit. I was just kind of different. Now I realize that's part of my unique magic, but that discussion will be part of the later videos. Because I was always different, I never really fit into one group. I was friends with all the groups, but didn't really fit the mold of the athletes, the cool kids, the nerdy kids, whatever labels they had for the different groups. I was pretty much friends with all of them. As I thought about my childhood dating, it made me laugh, is because I was thinking about the sweet and salty memories. As I was thinking about how my relationships were formed, while there were so many memories, and I'm not going to share all the stories and all the learning that will last forever, I've really been lucky throughout my life, candidly, with great people. A couple sweet memories came out. The first boy who told me he loved me was actually a friend who literally pecked me on the lips, said he loved me, and then pedaled his ass off on his bike away from me. And I never saw him again as his family moved back to the States from Saudi Arabia. So that was a pretty sweet memory and made me giggle. I wish I had seen him again. I'd love to see him again. Well, I had many boys that I thought were hot back in the day. They were a part of the cool kids group, and so I practiced writing my name with all their last names in my diary. I'm sure tons of you did that as a kid, over and over. My first real crush, and all the angst that comes with young love, came in the form of a son of a family friend. I don't remember exactly what age I was when he moved overseas to be with his dad and stepmom, but I do remember that almost immediately he pretty much became another member of our family because he was with us so much. He played basketball with us anytime we played. He ate dinner with us frequently and pretty much was just always around, and I absolutely adored him. We had all sorts of inside jokes like eating bone soup. By the way, my mom was back in the States going through chemotherapy, and I'll talk about her later. So my dad was serving as both dad and mom for that time, and as such threw the whole chicken into the crock pot before work to save some time. So we ate the bone soup, bones and all. We used to debate about futures, me and this boy. I was dead set on going to college. Education was super important to us. And he used to tell me it was a waste of time because he was going to be rich from farming. And while I was wasting my 4 years in college, he would pretty much build his future. It was an innocent relationship. We were close for a couple years, and I never made a move on him, nor did he make a move on me. We were just friends. In Saudi, we have middle school proms. As prom time came closer, I just knew this was the moment. When he brought it up to me, however, it was followed by his excitement about a girl he just asked out, saying yes. He was so excited. I went with someone else and sulked the whole time, my poor date. After that, our friendship didn't stay as close in the last couple of years in Saudi. That was my first introduction to heartbreak. I felt deeply for him in a way that only a young girl can. Well, I dated several people over my summers back in the States. We always came back from Saudi because my parents were teachers, and we spent our summers at a trailer just down the road from the beach. My only other crush in middle school was for the school bad boy, besides the summer crushes and dating. I remember this bad boy was huge, and he had a big reputation for beating people up. I remember noticing and observing him and realizing, even as a kid, well, he seemed eternally angry. He actually ended up beating up bullies at school, and any class that he disrupted loudly when the teacher was being a jerk to another student. So from my viewpoint, I was observing he was actually a teddy bear. Yeah, start of a long history of that, right? Anytime he interacted with me, he acted like that big teddy bear. And so I decided there and then he was highly misunderstood, and I needed to give him a chance to be his real self. Even as a kid, I thought that. He kind of reminded me, in addition to the teddy bear, of a porcupine. He was super spiny with a soft little belly. When I remembered all of this, it made me laugh, because clearly I have a well-worn history of being drawn to bad boys, seeing past their facades and into their mushy little hearts, and how their past hurts and rough lives manifested into tougher bad behavior. And somewhere deep inside of me, I decided over and over and over and over and over again, I was sunk and could help them with love. But of course, I didn't know it at the time when I was a kid. In the sexuality video, I talked about the 26-year-old, so I'm going to skip that because it doesn't deserve any additional airtime. But in addition to that, in high school, I had several relationships, some of which probably brought me bad karma in my adult life as it came back around. I was going to a prep school for high school in the States. We didn't really have high school in Saudi if you wanted to go to college in Europe. Sometime maybe I'll tell that story for another day. Just like in Saudi, in high school, at my boarding school, I was friendly with all the groups, but I still felt like a bit of an anomaly. I was in several groups. For example, I was voted biggest flirt in the superlatives and played sports. But I was also in classes like AP Calculus. So that's all to say, I just didn't fit into a box or a proverbial group or a proverbial label. As I dissected relationships in high school, many stories came to mind. But one of the ones was dating a best friend of mine who his mom thought I was a terrible influence on. And she was pretty direct in telling me that. And while I never told her it, he was actually the one who was the bad influence in reality. I always got kind of that label, just I guess because I was always kind of who I am. In prep school, we always had to have study hall, which I actually hated. So because I was known as smart, I always got permission to go and tutor in the guys' dorms. And so it made it easy to go hang out with my boyfriend or guy friends during that time. You also had to sign out for the weekend with permission slips. And seeing I was a supervisor for breakfast dish crew, as a side note, I don't think I showed up once because I hate mornings and still do. I could sign off on stuff, like I could sign the permission slip. The reason I'm telling you about this is I would forge my own permission slips to go off for the weekend. Or if I didn't show up for class, I would just forge my own demerit. Again, I know, karma. It was harmless. And usually during those times, I was hanging out with my boyfriend or guy friends. Just for the record, I did eventually get caught, but that's a story for another day. When I was a sophomore in high school, I had a huge crush on a senior who had a long-term girlfriend, not boyfriend. Well, both he and a post-grad, both part of the popular crew, always had me on their laps or were hugging on me. I never dated either of them. I think they thought of me as like a little sister. However, after the senior graduated, his brother ended up attending my prep school. So somewhere in my convoluted mind, I decided that it was good enough to date his brother. So I did. I don't know. I thought I was trying to replace him. Now, who knows? Now, before you jump all over me for this, honestly, I did like him. He was a great guy, and I dated him for a while. And I went to prom with him, too. Made up for my shitty prom in middle school. But in retrospect, it wasn't really fair to him. I thought he was a great guy, but I just didn't dig him like that. So we broke up. And then I dated someone else. Because I actually had feelings, shocker, based on my history in middle school, for a best friend instead. But I didn't really articulate that to my best friend or the guy I was dating, neither of them. As I was dissecting this, I realized I had work to do on both understanding that my gut was always right and the fact that I should always articulate what I want. I'm not a shy person as far as doing that, but I'm just not someone who's out there with my emotions historically. And here I thought I was always being transparent. Clearly I wasn't when it came to my feelings. Again, lots of different relationships, but when I got to college, even though I was working 3 full-time jobs to put myself through school, and more about that in a later video, I found plenty of time to have fun and date. I don't think I slept, but when I reflected back on this time, I realized that I really should have had more sleep. I took 6 classes too, but I also realized that even though I was so busy, I actually did a good job of playing back then and promised myself now a year ago when I was reflecting on this, that I'd embrace this again. You know, I needed to play more. While I did a lot of dissecting, there were a couple very poignant memories that bubbled to the surface and taught me some super valuable lessons in this dissection. Early in my sophomore year, or freshman year, I think it was sophomore year, I was spending a lot of time with one of the stars of the guys' basketball team. He was a super great guy. And then not too far time-wise into our relationship, he shared with me that he had terminal brain cancer. It wasn't public yet, but he wanted me to know about it because our relationship was progressing but not progressing. And now I understood. And he trusted me with his secret because he wasn't ready to stop playing ball yet, so that's why people didn't know. I remember at the time, I was stopped in my tracks and I was devastated for him, for me. I just remember being flat out angry with how unfair it was. He was such a great guy who had worked his ass off to get where he was, to have his life cut short in the prime of his life. I remember going downstairs, and I'm not proud of this. In the tunnel of the dorms, there was like a little tunnel. So he couldn't see me. And I literally punched out a window with my fist. I didn't know how to handle my anger back then. And I'll talk about it more in another video, how I later learned how to deal with my anger. But that was from my childhood shit. And the window shattered. I remember that. And candidly, at the time, it was super satisfying because it crashed all over the place. Not even a small cut on my hand. Again, not proud of it, just context. I ran into him later in that day, and we talked about it. And he quickly taught me a lesson. We had a deep talk about how he felt about the terminal brain cancer and how he came to terms with it, and how it made him live and appreciate every day to the fullest. I remember when we were having that conversation, he made me reflect on myself and how selfish I had been about my own emotions and how to look at life from a different perspective. Now, at the time, it didn't really sink in as thinking about the lessons in life versus thinking like a victim. But that's basically what he was teaching me, or planting the seeds of. He made me promise not to only try to live life every day as best as I could to the fullest, but try to do that with him as long as he had left. To laugh, to play, to give him shit, to live our best normal days. And so I honored that. And when he passed, he took a little piece of my heart with him. But he left me with such a great gift with his perspective and philosophies. He really was a great man and leader, even in college. I dated several other people in college before the man I spent 5 years with. I was someone who always knew that while I wanted someone in my life, I didn't need someone in my life. I've always been like that, even now. I was always transparent with people about not being committed in the relationships if I wasn't committed. I enjoyed dating and getting to know each other. And as bad as this may sound, dating each one of them was fulfilling a piece of my needs. What I mean by that is I simultaneously dated an athlete, a creative, a bookworm, if you label them based on today's society's labels. And I shared interests with all of them. I couldn't really find all my interests and layers in one person. And as such, I dated several people at once, and they all knew. I don't believe in lying, ever. Well, you might think from the surface that was all fine and good, seeing everyone was in the know. It actually ended up being a really bad decision on my part because there was too much drama. Unbeknownst to me at first, 2 of the guys ended up fighting behind a bar in the town that we lived in. And I ended up finding out about it in the middle of it from a friend and had to go stand between the 2 of them to break them up. It was just all too much. I'm just not a girl who likes drama. And I literally, despite the drama, just decided to end it and just didn't date for a while. Not too long after that, I met the guy that I spent 5 years with. Words can't express how much he changed my life and how much I learned from him. I could go on for hours about how lucky I was to both have and actually leave that relationship. But I'll focus on a couple of key learnings and the context around them that I realized. Our relationship, even the ending of our relationship, really set the standard for being great partners, both because he was truly my best friend and lover, and he was also a partner in every single way. When I met him, I had no self-confidence for so many reasons, including my childhood. Now, when people met me, they didn't know that. I had confidence in lots of things. I was smart. I was professional. I was fine on my job. It was just me as a person. And so his daily acts of love really transformed my confidence in so many different ways. For example, if I left my high heels in the car, driving home the night before, and it was cold out, he would blow dry them before giving them to me so my feet were warm. Or because he knew I loved Christmas, he built a wooden sleigh, compete with Santa and all the reindeer, and put it on our roof as a surprise when I came home from working full-time and then going to grad school class at night, because he knew I was just such a fan of Christmas. Or he taught our 125-pound German Shepherd how to wake my ass up on command by jumping on the bed and licking my face vigorously until I woke up. And honestly, he would try any adventure I'd want to go on. And I love adventures, everything from curling to weird festivals to new hobbies. You name it, he was always up for it. We even got a pet skunk because I wanted one. We named him Spot. So many great times. We were also living in different states when we met, so he romanced me in so many ways, which also taught me that love was safe, because it hadn't been before in my life. He wrote me so many letters, and they had always had creative bents with them, like puzzles or writing backwards or codes or something like that. He was super creative. They were always just warm, fun, and made me feel incredibly loved. He was an architect, so creativity just was part of his DNA. When I met him, I never wanted to get married. I just hadn't seen any marriage around me that I was willing to engage in. Period. I wasn't against love or even a partnership. I just didn't really believe in the institution of marriage. I remember that a year or two into our relationship, he sat down with me and really dug into that with me. And ultimately, he convinced me that someday in the future we should get married. And I relented into that thought of the future. I could gush for hours and hours about the amazing things that the relationship was and brought into my life. From fun, respect, love, solid foundations, great sex life, best friends, honesty, communications. The bottom line was it really taught me that you can have incredibly reciprocal relationships filled with mutual respect and love, even when you fight. But it eventually ended. So in order to give you the full picture, I need to talk about what didn't work and what I learned from it. Once he convinced me early on that we should eventually get married, I was convinced of that. And then about 4 years into our relationship, that started becoming an issue. Meaning that because we weren't engaged, it became an issue. At the time he had designed my ring, I'm still shocked, even though I knew where the design was. I never looked at it. I was taking a lack of his proposal as an indication of the fact that he didn't love me enough and was very vocal about that. He kept telling me all the time how much he did love me and showed me that, candidly, every single day. And we would get married when I realized that for myself. He was a couple years older than me too, by the way. Now, I told you earlier that he built my confidence being with him, and that was accurate. But at this time in my life, my confidence was then built on him and his love, not myself. Now, of course, I didn't realize that at that time. And this fight, we didn't really fight a lot, but it was a lot of angst and heartache, became an ongoing cycle. This was compounded with the fact that he really wasn't happy in his career. And because I wasn't self-confident, I took everything to mean he wasn't happy with me. I thought that every day he was unhappy was an indication of how he felt about me. And in retrospect, that just simply wasn't true. But then I believed it, and I owned it. Towards the end of our relationship, before I moved out, we talked about getting married. And he proposed. But it wasn't heartfelt, and I knew it. And as much as it broke my heart, I knew I needed to leave. We had 2 dogs. I took one dog, he took the other, and we had an amicable split. In fact, I remember my little brother coming down and helping me move, and he took me to the side and asked if we were really breaking up because we seemed to get along so well and loved each other so much. My ex, frankly, even had keys to my new place once I moved out so he could walk the dog while I was in class. To this day, it was one of the hardest things that I have ever done, but I never once regretted it. And I could tell this for hours. But there were several things that he taught me that I haven't addressed, that I want to address quickly. When we actually did fight, I was super dramatic then. I was always threatening to leave and slamming doors and all sorts of other things. You know, the anger I talked about in the tunnel. I was super dramatic and emotional, and he was pretty calm. I remember one time I made him so mad couple years into our relationship that all of a sudden he threw his beer bottle against a wall. It smashed into hundreds of pieces and made a huge noise. He said, "That's it. If you threaten that again, you're leaving." and I lived with him at this point in his house. I remember being so damn shocked that he raised his voice and he threw his beer bottle that it changed my actions forever. He was someone who was super quiet, super calm, almost too zen. But I realized then and there I was so shocked about his behavior that it changed my actions forever. I was never again dramatic. I never slammed shit. I never threatened to leave again because I knew he was serious. He, in 2 seconds flat, taught me that I needed to grow up. Another thing that he taught me was how to communicate better. I remember if we were having issues, I would want to hash it out immediately and vocally. I'm sure that shocked you all. He would sometimes need his own space to process it. Man, did that piss me off in the beginning. I totally took it as he didn't give a shit at all and was just walking off. Because I grew up that way, he needed to reprogram me, for lack of a better way of saying it. He taught me how to fight better and more productively to solve shit. He was super patient with me, and he knew that I needed to grow up in that way. He also taught me that I needed to work on my jealousy. I was so jealous when I was with him. I had a beautiful best friend at the time I actually met him, and she was known for running around naked. She was a stunning girl, and almost everyone in the college that I was going to wanted to date her. Not longer after I met my guy, he told me about her trying to pick him up and the exact conversation. I was blindsided, and needless to say, it ended my friendship with her. But I remember actually being stunned that he turned her down. And he told me about it. I share that story to say that I literally had zero founded worries about him being faithful to me, ever. I was just continually dealing with what I'd seen around me, my low self-confidence, and my own shadow side of insecure thoughts. While I never quite got to a place of not being jealous when I was with him, he did help me grow tremendously in that area. And then when I left and built my own self-confidence, I grew even more. He also taught me that I would never cheat on him or anyone that I was committed to. I remember at one of the lowest points in our relationship, I had literally worked 24 hours straight and was in the middle of an overnight shift at a front desk of a hotel. When we lived together, the difference was that his tuition was paid by his parents and mine was paid by me. So I was maximizing the hours during the summer to cobble together tuition. Anyways, I remember he swung by to tell me that he had decided last minute to drive to Atlanta to hang out with his best friend. Not only was I super pissed that he was going to have fun while I was slogging through my third shift in a row, but I was super jealous of his friend's wife, as she always hit on him, even when I was around. So needless to say, the whole situation had pissed me off. This is not an excuse, just an explanation. And of course, I wasn't going to make him stay in town because I was going to be just super pissy. But in my head, I wanted him to want to stay and keep me company during the last 5 hours, my 21st hour of working or whatever it was. But he didn't offer and bounced. And so a couple hours later, and not to be dramatic, but an executive who looked like a Greek god came into my hotel and started to hit on me. At the time, I was not only pissed about my guy, but I also had a big guy who was trying to be a guest at the hotel, we were booked, threaten, this is in the middle of the night, threatened to grab me and put him in his car and ride around with him until he found a room. I'll be honest with you, with him, I completely lost my temper. I wasn't even scared that I was alone. I told the guy off and told him I would welcome a fight with him, or if he tried to throw me in his car, I would welcome kicking his ass because I was already pissed at my guy and working 24 hours and I was tired. And I hope he dared trying to lay hands on me. The huge guy, he probably thought I was a lunatic, ran off. So anyway, so I'm pissed at my guy. I'm pissed at the guy who's threatening me. And then suffice to say, it was a rough night when the Greek god appeared. He looked literally mimicked, like right out of my favorite romance novel, like he was custom designed for me. And he was hitting on me. It's like 2 a.m. Totally focused on me, giving me tons of compliments, making me laugh, and even delivering me unsolicited dinner so I could dine with him in the lobby. I told him I was taken, and he told me while he understood it, he didn't understand why my man was such a fool for not being there to keep me company. Not only did I agree with him, but I texted a full report of my ongoings with the Greek god to my boyfriend who's playing with his best friend in Atlanta. And I had worked myself into such a tizzy that I let my Greek god give me a shoulder massage. And like I said, I'm transparent. I told my boyfriend exactly what was going on, sans, of course, the fact that the guy looked like a Greek god and my fantasy made to order. As soon as I texted my boyfriend, I realized I was being an imbecile, an immature. I thanked the Greek god for the shoulder massage, took his hands off me, and told him he should retire to his room after thanking him for making my night. He offered up his number and I didn't take it. After that happened, I heard back from my boyfriend, and honestly, he was pretty pissed, understandably. He wasn't the asshole, though, that he should have been at that moment to me. He just expressed that I should have been more vocal about me being pissed he left. And he had truly no idea. He just was clueless, and he would have stayed, and that we needed to talk in the morning when he got back. I apologized to him. I felt like shit, and told him exactly what happened and how I felt about it. When we got back, we worked it out, and we were better for it. I'm not someone who ever cheats. I'm always someone who's transparent. But let me tell you, I knew if I was someone who was inclined to cheat, that would have been the moment. The guy that I dated was also introduced me some of my favorite things in life. He introduced me to nature, Chianti, Louis Armstrong, architecture, my Miss Nympho self, what romance should be, so many things. But also, by leaving him, I also learned so many things. I learned to believe in myself. I learned that I needed someone who was as strong as me in the face of adversity. I also learned that choosing to be happy every day was a necessity. I learned that I love to travel by myself globally. I learned that I need to spend, part of the year, every year, in places that have cultural activities. And I learned to never settle, no matter how much love you share. I was so grateful for the lessons that I learned by being in this relationship, and also leaving that relationship. I was honored to be a part of his world for a time, and him mine. I'm going to stop here, as this will take too long to upload, as I told you, so join me in the part 2 in the next video for the rest of my dissection of the relationships. See you there.